Welcome back. For weeks, we've been bringing you the latest on the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. But 120 years ago, Olympians were competing right here in St. Louis. This morning, we're diving deep into the history tied to the 1904 Games, the good and not so great that you may not know.
It's part of the reason that when, people talk about the Olympic history in the U.S., St. Louis sometimes doesn't get mentioned as having the first Olympic Games. It's because it's wrapped up in that thorny history.
A very sharp thorn on the rose that is the 1904 Olympic Games. It was the first Olympic Games held in America, where the first African-American medalist took the podium. Some of the history was made on Francis Field, but a darker past is rooted in another historic event just a discus throw away, the 1904 World's Fair.
It was both like, this wondrous event full of things like ice cream cones and Ferris wheels and new technologies, but it's also really complex, right? There's a complex history of racism and colonialism that's a part of the World's Fair.
Thousands of African, Filipino, and indigenous people put on display in exhibits at the World's Fair, then forced to compete on the world stage.
The guy who organized those games, he also organized something called the Anthropology Days. They were compelled to compete in Western style Olympic events with little training and little instruction. And then their results were compared against white athletes. And they were used as evidence for, theories about racial hierarchies of the day that always had white people at the pinnacle of, evolution. It's so important that we engage with that thorny history so we can learn a little bit more about where we came from and how we got to where we are today.
Learning where we came from, and in doing the story, just digging into what was actually happening at the World's Fair, which is such a pride and joy for our city, but it's important to know the full picture.
Absolutely. I was going to say pride and pain kind of go hand in hand. And it's interesting because you mentioned the Philippine Village. We still have descendants of the Philippine Village living in the city. We've featured them before. So
our past always shapes our present, even if it's not so pretty. Now, as we were looking into the 1904 Games, we did find out though that this was the first time a known disabled athlete competed, and he actually won 6 medals in gymnastics. 3 of those medals were gold. So lots to learn about our city's history.
Yeah, absolutely.